new true crime podcast you need to hear to believe.
I need police right now. I've just started broken in my house.
2 men dead at the hands of a teenager and almost every moment recorded.
Please, don't move.
Put the knife down.
I was just trying to help her.
What happened at Alba Beach was as horrific as it was baffling.
There's so much contradiction. We should know more than we know.
I'm Adam Hegarty. I'll take you inside one of the country's most confusing investigations in this exclusive 60 Minutes podcast.
Ambulance, police, inquest, a domino effect of failures. It's killing us.
I'm not a police officer anymore. I can speak more freely.
Alba Beach, Death at the Door, wherever you get your podcasts.
The Australian Financial Review.
Hello, I'm James Thompson, Senior Chanticleer columnist at the AFR. Welcome to our weekly news breakdown of all things business, finance and markets. With me today, as always, is my Chanticleer colleague. He's steadier than Australia's official interest rate. It's Anthony McDonald. How are you, Anthony?
Hopefully I've also bottomed this year, James, and headed up next year.
Fantastic. This week we look at why the RBA is stuck between a rock and a hard place. We examine the takeover battle that could change how you watch Netflix. And we take the pulse of Australia's top business leaders through the Chanticleer CEO poll.
But first, James, I know how much you love a double coat Tim Tam.
Oh, yes.
And this week, we, the taxpayer, stepped up to ensure that those little bites of chocolatey goodness continue to roll off the production line when the National Reconstruction Fund tipped in $45 million into a $1.7 billion refinancing of Arnott's debt. Now, Arnott's is owned by the private equity giant KKR, the firm that started the whole global private equity sector in many ways. Why are we lending money to a big private equity-backed company?
This is a really interesting question, Anthony, and I think everybody's sort of a bit puzzled as to why the National Reconstruction Fund, the NRF, needs to go and lend to KKR. The original barbarians at the gate, as you said, you know, that they were the big US buyout firm that started this whole private equity sector. So we asked David Gall, the CEO of the NRF, who is a listener to the podcast, Anthony.
Good to hear.
Told me you got a shock a few months ago when he heard his name on the podcast as he was walking down the shops on Saturday morning.
Sorry, David.
And what he says is, we're probably thinking about the NRF in the wrong way. So you hear National Reconstruction Fund, and what it says to you, or what it says to me, I should probably say, is here is a fund that's going to step in where there's no other options. Here is a fund that's going to back industries where we want them to thrive, but there's a lot of risk. And yes, the NRF might do both of those things, but Gall's point is that first and foremost, this is a commercial fund. It's there to get a commercial return. Now, it's got 7 criteria or 7 strategic areas that it focuses on. One of those is agriculture, which is where Arnott's comes in. And so if it finds a deal that sits under one of those 7 areas, again, agriculture, advanced manufacturing, climate and energy, just to name a few, and it can get a commercial return out of this. In this case, this refinancing was offering an interest rate of around 6.5% to 7%. If it ticks both those boxes, it's going to go in and do it. Now, does the NRF worry about the fact that it's lending into a deal that had lots of demand, lots of interest from lots of different investors? The NRF's involvement didn't tip this deal over the line one way or another. It was helpful, particularly in the Arnott's case, to have some long-term Australian debt because Arnott's is trying to do some long-term things like rework its production line. But taxpayer money wasn't really needed here, but the NRF, again, is a commercial fund. It saw a commercial opportunity, and its argument is this thing's supposed to be self-sufficient in 12 months' time, so it's not going to be a drain on the public purse. Why not go out and find a good revenue opportunity that, you know, meets its due diligence requirements and sits under the priority areas that it's been mandated to chase? I can understand all that. I get the logic, but I think, Anthony, this is a bit of an identity issue for the NRF. It's big, it's broad, it's got lots of areas it can invest across, and we're still working out what this thing is. And I don't think that any of us had in our mind when we heard about the NRF's creation and when we hear about the NRF today that it would be necessarily doing these types of deals lending to a big refinancing package for a private equity-owned business that's travelling along perfectly fine. To be very clear, this is not a bailout. This company does not need any help. Got plenty of interest, it's got plenty of money, it's doing fine.
Okay, so they're a commercial fund. How's its form? Is it making money for us?
Not really clear yet. I mean, they've done 17 deals, so we're very early in the life of this fund. I think we'll probably, most managed funds out there on the market, they tend to like a 3-year track record. I think we've got to do the same with the NRF.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just a bit of confusion that we thought the NRF was one thing and it's actually this other thing. We're still trying to figure out what this is. Does that make sense to you, Anthony? Does that pass the pub test, as they say?
James, I'm not sure I'm buying Arnott's double coat Tim Tams, and I'm not sure I'm buying the National Reconstruction Fund's reasoning here either.
Okay.
Maybe it's a branding issue, but tipping in about 2.5% of a $1.7 billion debt package, you get no control, no board seat, no nothing, right? You're just a passive investor.
Yep.
How's that reconstructing anything? Obviously, I didn't quite get the remit that this is supposed to be a broader for money-making fund, but I'm just not sure the government's business model should be out there trying to make 6-7% a year on Arnott's debt. I'm not sure what we're doing. Like, yeah, sure, if that's the goal, then let's leverage up our AAA rated balance sheet and just go for broke. You don't have to stop at Arnott's, but we can make it 3% tax-free spread on everything. But hopefully the government has better ideas than that.
Yeah, well, I think it's one to watch. I mean, I think the NRF, David Gall, he keeps getting out there and explaining these deals, and that's what we want.
Yeah.
That's the important thing. So, as I said, I think the identity of this thing will become clearer as the lineup of deals grows. Here was a confluence of 2 big brand names, Arnott's and KKR, and that's going to get scrutiny, and I don't think that scrutiny is unhealthy in this case.
Yeah, I agree, James.
All right, Anthony, we know how much you love a deal, and on Saturday night, we woke to a whopper. Netflix, which of course has more than 6 million subscribers in Australia, announced it had agreed to a US $82.7 billion deal to buy Warner Brothers, the iconic Hollywood studio and entertainment business. That's about $124 billion in the Australian peso. Now, the Warner Brothers board agreed to this deal, and it all looked like was going well until Paramount, which is backed by the Ellison family in the US and Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, swooped in with a hostile takeover worth $163 billion. Now, Anthony, can you quickly explain to us what a hostile takeover is, but more importantly, who's going to win this fight?
A hostile takeover, James, is when a bidder tries to buy a company without that company's support. So in this case, you've got Warner Brothers ran a secret auction over the course of a few months, decided to do this cash and script deal with Netflix. Paramount, the underbidder, went ballistic and said, that's fine, Warner Brothers, we're going to go straight to your shareholders and buy the company right from under your feet. So Paramount's offering, notionally US $30 a share. Netflix's deal valued at about US $27.75. So Paramount's at face value is materially higher. Now, this is high stakes deal making, James. Like, it's big, high profile, involves huge syndicates, debt and equity providers. It's already gone all the way to the White House.
Yes.
Both bids potentially face regulatory hurdles, and particularly Netflix's. It's the biggest streaming company in the US and globally. And now it wants to get even bigger, as these streaming companies try and own their customers even more. In terms of who will win, well, auctions are normally pretty simple, James. The winner's the one that bids the most.
Yeah.
Who can bid the most here? Like, it's easy to see the synergies in the strategy on Paramount's side, to be honest. It's Paramount Plus streaming service could use a bit of a kick along. You add in Warner Brothers HBO Max, which is a significant player, together take on Netflix. And like I said, for Netflix, it wants to use some of that content to keep more people within its system. But a lot of its subscribers would be HBO Max's subscribers. So there's a lot of double up. So you wouldn't think they'd be killing HBO Max because they still want to milk those subscriptions from people like yourself, James, who love their telly.
Indeed.
If this was in Australia, I'd say it's headed towards a split every day of the week. There's 2 syndicates, fight it out for a few months, maybe go as far as the regulatory review, throw shade at each other, swear and carry on, argue they're better, all that sort of stuff before getting in a room one Saturday morning and just nutting it out between them. That's how this would go down in Australia. I'm not sure in the US if it's like that, but as a Netflix subscriber, and there's 6.2 million of us in Australia, James,
yes.
I think it's worth watching. It shows that these big, hugely successful disruptors are now sort of thinking about the next leg. You know, they're thinking about disrupting others, disrupting themselves maybe, and trying to work out where it's all going.
Yeah, Anthony, I've got some big news. This is an exclusive, a world exclusive for the Chanticleer podcast. I know who's going to be the winner here.
Who?
Bankers and lawyers. Bankers and lawyers, they're going to win so many times over. Let me explain why. This is a stupid idea. These big media deals, they never work. This will blow up. I'm sure one of these sides will win. Doesn't really matter which one. But as we've seen over history, these media deals always come a cropper. So the bankers and lawyers will win on the way in when they get this deal done. And then they'll win on the way out when in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, inevitably, the monolith that ends up winning Warner Brothers will split off parts of the business and there'll be a breakup and the bankers and the lawyers will win again as they do that deal. I mean, I don't know if you saw the break fee here, Anthony. Yeah. So if Netflix isn't successful, Warner Brothers has to pay Netflix $5.8 billion US. I think it's the biggest break fee in history. How good's that? They could lose and still win. These things are always fascinating. The tell is Netflix's share price, isn't it? They announce this deal, its share price goes down because investors go, sorry, you're going to do what?
Yeah.
You're going to spend the next how many years trying to nut this business out that's actually not going that well? This has got disaster written all over it. It's a great swashbuckling takeover fight, which we love. I mean, let it run for many months, but this will end in disaster and the only winners will be bankers and lawyers, and they're a downtrodden group, so I'm glad to see they're going to do well.
Yeah, it feels like the write-downs will be bigger than that break fee, James, eventually.
Yeah, quite possibly. Okay, Anthony, let's move to our first topic of the week. And Reserve Bank Governor Michelle Bullock did exactly what everyone expected on Tuesday afternoon and left rates on hold at 3.6%. But the decision was only the start of the drama because Bullock's message in the post-meeting press conference was clear. The obvious risk is that the next move in interest rates is up because the RBA is simply too worried about inflation rearing its head again. Anthony, you've been in the hold camp for a while, but are you surprised that the RBA is being so explicit about the threat of a rate hike next year?
Not really, James. Inflation was 3.2% in the year to September 30, or 3% on the RBA's preferred trim mean basis. While neither number is disastrous compared to what it was a couple of years ago, I mean, it showed a clear change in trajectory of inflation. That's higher than what the RBA wanted to see. It didn't want to see that turn around like it has. And the way the RBA sees it is maybe now Australia's economy may be at capacity, you know, with the jobs market so stretched and resources so stretched more broadly that we can't grow much faster than we are at the moment without sending prices through the roof. That's a bad thing for Australia. It's a direct consequence of having nil productivity growth like we talk about all the time on the podcast, James. So what's the RBA supposed to say? You know, Michelle Bullock could sit there and pretend everything's rosy, but part of her job, I think, is making people wake up and smell those roses sometimes, James. And there's nothing wrong with her calling a spade a shovel if it has such an important underlying message. And I think her message is we really need to kick along some of those productivity measures. Otherwise, we can forget about rate cuts unless the economy gets really bad, which is what none of us want, is it?
True, but isn't the real message here, if you step back from it, that the RBA is like the rest of us, doesn't really know what's going to happen next? I mean, you know, I take your point. I think you're right. Michelle Bullock's worried about inflation. She's the RBA governor. She should be getting on the front foot and saying, jawboning the community even a little bit. Say, hey, take a little bit of heat out of here or rates are going to go up. But to me, what's fascinating is the change in messaging. Bullock wasn't standing on the aircraft carrier with the mission accomplished sign behind her, but she was certainly taking the boat out to the aircraft carrier. You know, there was a lot of excitement that the narrow path had been found. But you're right. I mean, what else can she say? She needs to get on the front foot. Inflation sucks for everyone. Yeah, you're right. The messaging needs to be clear.
Yeah, so the messaging has changed, James. But does any of this really matter? You know, households seem to be coping pretty well with rates at this level. The economy looks relatively resilient. Is this big shift in the RBA's view showing up anywhere?
Well, have a look at the ASX 200, Anthony. I think it was about October 27, something like that, where we got a monthly inflation print that looked pretty nasty. The ASX is down about 6% since then. So, yeah, it's showing up. The idea that rates are going up has rippled through the stock market. It's rippled through the Australian bond market. Actually, it's ripped through the Australian bond market. Bond yields have whipsawed in the last 8 weeks or so. The 10-year yield, which is, you know, a sort of benchmark for Australian government bonds, it's up around the sort of highest levels it's got to in the last 15 years. So, yeah, this matters. This matters to the cost of borrowing, and it matters to the future value of shares. Is it crushing the economy? Are consumers bleeding out there with the rates at this level? Probably not. But I think it does matter. To me, that's the sort of intriguing thing here. We had got to the point midway through the year where we expected that the rate easing cycle would be deeper and longer than it's proven to be. So now you have this reset in psychology and expectations. No, I'm not getting any more relief there. I mean, if you were one of the people who went out and bought a house in, I don't know, July, August, September, as we know a lot of people, and particularly investors have, you're banking on another rate cut. Maybe you're even banking on another 2 rate cuts. They're not coming. How does that change your psychology going into 2026? Do you pull your horns in a bit? Hopefully, because that'll help take the edge off inflation. But I just think, watch this space a bit. It's going to be interesting in the next little while.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm blaming the RBA for that.
No.
October 27, James, that's great recall from you. I mean, that's obviously why the ABC had you on 7:30 this week, James. It was great to see you on the TV.
Oh, thank you, Anthony.
Super insight. Now, on Thursday morning, we had a big decision from America's version of the RBA, the Federal Reserve, which cut rates by 25 basis points, or 0.25%, to between 3.5% and 3.75%. James, you listened in to Fed Chair Jerome Powell, and his message was to expect more cuts. Was that the right call? And does the fact Australia and the US are moving in opposite directions even matter?
Yeah, it's a funny thing. You look at inflation in the US, that their target's to have inflation at 2%. It's been above that for the best part of 5 years now. And on the Fed's projections, it's going to be above that for 8 years, 7 to 8 years. You look at the stock market, all-time highs. House prices, all-time highs. Gold, all-time highs. Doesn't exactly scream, please, sir, we need a rate cut, does it?
No.
But not only did Jerome Powell say, here's a cut, 3rd consecutive cut, he made it clear that there's more coming. There's definitely no hike on the cards. And of course, next year, Powell will be out of a job and Donald Trump will appoint his person as the Fed chair. It's probably going to be a guy called Kevin Hassett, who has made it very clear he expects rates to come down. So is this the right call? I think the next Fed governor could be a bit like Michelle Bullock in a not too distant future, worried that inflation spiked again. You've got a few other issues in America. You've got tariffs, obviously. We haven't seen the full impact there. Immigration is an issue there. For the first time in many, 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 many years, the labour pool in America is going to shrink. It's going to go backwards. That puts upwards pressure on wages and prices. And so it's a really interesting discussion as to whether this is the right call. There are cracks in the US labour market, unquestionably, but are they that big? The weakness is pretty moderate. Again, there's no recession or anything worse on the cards, it appears. But it does matter that Australia's interest rates are now heading up, likely, and US interest rates are going down. And the transmission point is the Australian dollar, isn't it, Anthony?
Absolutely it is.
Shot up on Thursday morning, and it looks like it's headed to US 70 cents. So that's what the sort of pundits are suggesting. So that's probably good for the RBA, though, because it means we're not importing inflation. But that'll have some other implications, won't it? Yeah,
it's just one of those stabilisers in the economy. In the near term, James, it's no good for all those investment bankers going on Christmas holidays in the US and Canada, skiing, in Japan.
Yes.
But, they can, I'm sure they'll be able to afford their extra expensive coffees.
Indeed. Anthony, I wanted to bring in a listener question here that I think is really important as we sort of step back and think about the RBA's year. It's from Alex in Hampton down in Melbourne. Let's take a listen.
Hi, Chanticleer. So we're about a year out from the government getting its RBA reforms through Parliament following Treasury's review into the Reserve Bank. My question is, after the reforms being in place for about a year, how do you actually see the changes since the reform in effect? And has there been a substantial impact on how monetary policy is conducted as a result of these reforms in Australia?
Anthony, this is a really good question because Alex is right. The reforms were big and important and sold as such by Treasurer Jim Chalmers and the RBA to some extent. I guess the main sort of difference for us is that we have this press conference every 6 weeks or so where Michelle Bullock generously takes questions for 45 odd minutes or so and does a great job of explaining how the wheels are turning in different parts of the economy. Is that the main point of difference, the main evidence of how these changes are reshaping the way monetary policy is delivered in Australia?
Yeah, probably, James. I think it was on March 1. Just from the top of my head, hello, 7:30 report. It's definitely changed the way that the decisions are communicated, James. Although the substance of the decisions and the way that Michelle Bullock sort of rationalises them, I'd say it's still broadly the same.
Yeah.
You know, we have 8 meetings per year, down from 11. I think that's been pretty seamless. And if anything, I think it's good. I think there's a lot of distraction in having monthly meetings, James. Like if there's some emergency, have an emergency meeting.
Yep.
But just month to month, you know, like there's a whole hoo-ha around this that, you know, you feel everything sort of slows down and then quickens up around the rates decision.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that's really a productivity driver. Hopefully, at least there's more scrutiny on monetary policy decisions. And that's the whole point of this, right? Like the whole point was to get more experts, external experts around the monetary policy board, and putting more scrutiny and more sort of testing of the RBA's internal sort of work and the way that they were thinking, and just try and bring it out a little bit into the external environment and saying, hang on, I mean, RBA, your internal team, you've got heaps of economists, I'm sure they're good at their job. You're saying this thing, but how does that really marry up to what the rest of the world and the rest of business, the rest of society is kind of thinking? So I think it's gone pretty well, James, pretty seamlessly, to be honest. I mean, one thing that I've sort of taken from this year is just watch for the big moves, if there are to be moves from the board after the quarterly CPI decisions.
Yeah.
You know, we've had 3 cuts this year. Each of them have come straight after a quarterly inflation number. Yeah, I think that just shows that, you know, that's the number that the RBA economists and the board are really willing to lean in behind.
Yes.
And not so much the, you know, monthly ups and downs.
Yeah. I think the RBA's done a great job with their communications. They don't get everything right, but they do get out there and try and explain everything. Bullock's great in these press conferences. She's warm. She's never patronising. She explains things, not dismissive of ideas or questions. She got a question on Tuesday, Anthony. What was the most challenging conversation you've had? And like at the time I thought, what the hell is that question? I think it's from David Taylor from ABC.
Yeah.
And Bullock said, you know what the most challenging conversation is? It's the internal conversations where someone inside the RBA has taken the opposite side of my view and tried to convince me of not necessarily why I'm wrong, but what the alternative view is. And, you know, maybe that's a nice way of saying, hey, debate is alive inside the RBA, but it got the point across. It took us inside the 4 walls a little bit, and I think that's valuable.
Yeah, I think she'd go right on a podcast, James.
She would, yes. We'll put in a request for next year.
Okay, James, let's move to our second topic of the week. And as we always say, one of the great privileges of this job is that Australia's top business leaders are so willing to give us their time. And part of that is our annual Chanticleer CEO poll. Over the last couple of weeks, more than 50 of Australia's top CEOs have answered 15 or so questions, ranging from what's happening across the economy, what's the reform they want to see from government, what they're doing in AI, and even what they read, watch, and listen to, and how they manage stress. James, you've been through all these answers. It's been a huge week. You've taken on a lot. Give me a top-down view of the mood, please.
Grumpy.
Yeah.
Grumpy is my word.
Who, you or them?
No, them. Look, I think there's a sense of frustration that, you know, Australia's got all these advantages, these sort of natural inbuilt advantages of energy, a sort of can-do spirit, lots of capital from our superannuation system, but we're not putting it all together.
Mm-hmm.
I just would mention there's a great quote from Vicky Brady, the CEO of Telstra, who says, "We have a small window of opportunity now to position ourselves for the future and remain competitive as technology evolves. But that window is closing fast. Investments will be made, industries will be built elsewhere, and Australia will miss out. The longer we delay, the more the opportunity starts to pass us by." And I think that's the frustration, that's the grumpiness that we're doing okay, but we really could be doing better if we just unleashed a few things. There is a clear view that the RBA has done all it can to tame inflation. It's now up to government.
Yeah.
Now, Mike Henry from the CEO of BHP says there's too much wasteful spending by government. We need to get that out so we take the pressure off the RBA and take the pressure off inflation. Lots of agreement from that, the likes of Ryan Stokes from Seven Group, Todd Barlow from Sol Patterson. So, I think that's a big part of their frustration, that we're almost there. We've got lots of things going for us, but we just can't unleash the potential that we've got. And I think a lot of CEOs who've been in the hot seat for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 years just feel that's not changing. There's been moments when we thought we could get it changed, and it just hasn't happened. I mean, Anthony, we had this economic reform roundtable back in August, and as we've said previously, the momentum's really dissipated. But you read the responses from our CEOs, their hunger for reform and for productivity growth has not changed at all. What are some of the things that they want to see done?
Yeah, James, I think there was almost universal applause that the government went through this process.
Yeah,
I mean, even if we haven't seen Jim Chalmers' 10 priorities areas turn into 10, firm action plans, and I think there's even a bit more cynicism about whether the roundtable was real or what it was ever going to achieve. I think the businesses appreciated the chance that they at least got to have a say. They got to make submissions. They feel like the government at least consulted them, even if the whole thing probably wasn't as bold as and ambitious as what business wanted it to be. But it's definitely helped open the discussion, James. And I think as you just said then, I feel like the CEOs, if you could sum it up, they'd be like, we went through COVID. Out of that, we got the inflation era. Then we got the cost of living crisis. Then we got the monetary policy era.
Yeah.
Let's rule a line under that and move into the get stuff done era.
Yeah, well said.
So, hey, to be honest, there's a really long list of stuff that came out that thereafter. I think, though, the big companies focused around a few key ones, James, and that's, tax reform, planning approvals, industrial relations reform, and energy. I think were the 4 big things. And they're probably 4 things that the CEOs have been banging on for a while about now. But I think the pitch is becoming even clearer that we really do need to tinker settings around at least 2 or 3 of those 4 big ones to get Australia firing. But I mean, other stuff that came up, investing in regional infrastructure, the old cut red tape and complexity, always topical. Energy, like I said, skill shortages, things like migration settings and how that flows into the construction sector. Insurance Australia Group called that out, the insurer, as well as Lendlease's Tony Lombardo. Oil and gas approval processes, tax reform, like I said. One that caught my eye, James, we bang on here about how good the super system is, and it's been great for people in the age when they're still working and they're adding to their balances, right?
Yep.
But what about the flip to retirement? And we've now got the sort of super leaders telling us, hang on, the retirement side of things, it's maybe not as good as you think it is.
Yeah, as good as it needs to be.
As good as it needs to be, exactly. But I thought those big companies, they were very unified. Like rereading the responses last night, I was surprised at how unified they were. And I think BHP's Mike Henry, he sort of summed it up, simplifying, accelerating project approvals, ensuring reliable and affordable energy, reforming industrial relations to support productivity, and creating a tax system that incentivises investment are critical steps. And for me, it's those 4.
Yeah. And I think Steve Johnson from the CEO of the insurer Suncorp, he came back to that idea that, the government's got a chance to do this. Use your majority, use the sort of benefit of time and have a crack at this stuff. I think business is going to get right behind it. You go back to COVID, I think recapturing even a skerrick of that sort of Team Australia, it's there, it's latent, it can be harnessed, but it's not easy.
James, we also asked them how to tackle the challenge of intergenerational inequality.
Yeah.
And we got some really passionate answers. Any good suggestions for us?
Oh, well, the thing I'd say is, we always think of CEOs as pretty self-absorbed, looking after the interests of themselves and their companies, and that's true a lot of the time. But this question really brought out to me that they do care about Australia as a economy and country and their role in sort of that social compact of leaving something better for the next generation. Some great practical ideas. I mean, everyone's on about housing, right? We need more housing supply. That's not really an idea to me because, how do you get there? But there were some ideas on how to get there. Change property taxes, phase out stamp duty and focus on land taxes would help housing affordability and mobility, says Wesfarmers boss Rob Scott. Get building productivity, building site productivity. It's gone backwards for 20 years. You know, let's get that rising. Ross DeVernay from Dexus, he points out that we actually don't have a supply issue. We've got more housing approvals in the last year than we have had for a while. We just can't get these things out of the ground. Great point. Anthony Miller from Westpac, build the right homes. The median wage is 90 grand. We need to build homes that are 500K to 600K. That's the sweet spot. How do you do that? Well, Evolution mining boss Laurie Conway, Stuart Tonkin from Northern Star Resources, they're saying go bush, get more houses in rural and regional areas, get government support in terms of infrastructure and jobs out there. That helps to take the pressure off the cities which are, you know, constrained. So there's lots of good ideas. I really liked this line from Rob Spurway. He's the managing director of Grain Corp.
Yeah.
He said we just got to think about things in a different way. Like, much of Australia, he says, is still operating on a blueprint designed decades ago when career paths were linear, home ownership was assumed, and leadership was tied to tenure. That's a great point. And it just made me sit up and think, do I still think like that? I probably do.
Yeah, the three anchors of my life, I reckon.
Yeah, and they're three anchors of a lot of people's lives. And when you think about your kids' lives or your grandkids' lives, you're thinking, well, that's what they'll need to do too. But Spurway makes the point that that's not how things are going to roll from here. And maybe that's part of addressing intergenerational inequality too. We need to recognise that there's different models. So it's a great question. But Anthony, one of my favourite things to ask in this survey is what's the risk or opportunity that we're not thinking enough about? Because often these business people, they see things that we don't get to see in the broader economy. Did any responses really grab you here?
Yeah, a few, James. Ryan Stokes, SGH's boss, talked about unsustainable welfare growth. And, you know, that's something that we sort of bubbles around in the front section of the paper, right? We think about it as a Canberra issue.
Yeah.
But Ryan says, like, quite eloquently, we need to make sure that welfare doesn't sap motivation, but support and propel people forward. You know, he calls out the NDIS as a sort of a noble concept that's become unwieldy and lacks strong and effective controls from government. And, I think his views are quite sensible, but we often don't see our corporate leaders come out and be willing to say these things, particularly around a tough topic like the NDIS. So I thought it was interesting that he was willing to get on the front foot on that one.
Yeah.
Like I said before, the retirement, Alexis George at AMP. AMP's obviously one of the big for-profit super funds out there. She was big on the retirement system. You know, she says that, you know, one of our greatest national achievements is the superannuation system, yet we haven't cracked how to turn that into what to do when you retire. How do you build confidence in the system to get the retirees spending their money to keep the whole sort of economy cycling around, and to sort of share some of that wealth or give it back, I guess, or release some of it into other parts of society. So, I mean, she talks about a confidence gap. You know, people are retiring there. They don't have the confidence that they're going to have enough money for as long as they need it. So they hold on to it, and then it just sort of breaks down that recycling of it. And James, I don't think we can talk about the Chanticleer CEO poll either without mentioning Matt Common. Obviously went to AI, loves talking about technology, and he's right on the front foot saying Australia's got to embrace it. You know, it's sort of now or never, a bit like Vicky Brady. You know, there's a big change going on in technology infrastructure, in the way that these software programs are through your technology stack, what they can do for the economy, what they can do for a company, what they could do for the country. And it's sort of now or never. But the problem is these are all owned, or the big platforms are owned by offshore companies, and it's how do you stop these guys taking all the profits for themselves and taking it back home, rather than, you know, helping give some of that back to Australia.
Yeah, it's a great point. Anthony, we'll be rolling out responses across AFR weekend in the Saturday paper. In the Monday paper, we'll even have some going into the bumper editions that AFR puts out at the end of the year. So look out for this stuff. And thanks to all our CEOs too for participating. We had more than 50 of our top business leaders. And Anthony, I reckon we haven't had a set of responses this thoughtful in the history of the poll. It's just some great stuff. And it just demonstrates how much these people really care about this place, which is great to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks to everyone for taking the time.
All right, we'll be back after the break. It might be almost Christmas time, but things are not slowing down next week. Back in a sec.
A new true crime podcast you need to hear to believe.
I need police right now. I've just started broken into my house.
2 men dead at the hands of a teenager and almost every moment recorded.
Please, don't move.
Put the knife down.
I was just trying to help her.
What happened at Alba Beach was as horrific as it was baffling.
There's so much contradiction. We should know more than we know.
I'm Adam Hegarty. I'll take you inside one of the country's most confusing investigations in this exclusive 60 Minutes podcast.
Ambulance, police, inquest, a domino effect of failures. It's killing us.
I'm not a police officer anymore. I can speak more freely.
Alba Beach, death at the door, wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, welcome back. If you want to know more about what we're talking about today, and a whole lot more, AFR subscribers can sign up to the Chanticleer newsletter at join.afr.com/Chanticleer. Every Saturday morning, the newsletter pulls together the best Chanticleer columns from the week and delivers them straight to your inbox. Anthony, I can hear the sleigh bells in the distance. But things are not slowing down next week. On Monday, Rodney Forrest, the former fund manager who's pleaded guilty to insider trading, is going to be sentenced. That'll be fascinating to watch. What sentence he receives, I guess. This is a big focus area for ASIC, and it'd be really interesting to see what result they get.
Yeah, a lot of the people we speak to in capital markets, James, will be watching this one. I'm watching it as well to see if he appears on your good, bad and ugly list, James, which is always a feature, but you've probably got lots to write about this year.
Oh, it's been a shocker. On Wednesday, MyEFO, the mid-year economic and fiscal outlook. So this is the budget update from Treasurer Jim Chalmers will be released. And we've already been softened up in some ways. There needs to be some cuts to spending, maybe hearing the complaints of those CEOs. The energy subsidies, Anthony, are going to be turned off. Be interesting to see whether there's any big reform in this one. My sense is that Albanese and Chalmers will keep their powder dry for the May budget. Is that your sense too?
Yeah, probably, James. Maybe we'll get an upgrade from the NRF and its recent investments.
That's right. A free packet of double coats for everyone in Australia. And on Thursday, the ANZ Bank is having their AGM. This is going to be fascinating because it hasn't been a great year for ANZ, and we might hear about a bit of the views of the investors, the unhappy views of the investors from the floor of that meeting, I think.
I'd say we will, and hopefully then we can rule a line under it and call it end of an era, and we'll see what happens the year after.
Yes, and we should say next Friday is the release of the annual Chanticleer special final episode. We're going to have a special guest in the house to give us some views on the market and even a few stock tips, Anthony. So watch out for that one. It's going to be great fun. All right, we had a question earlier on the Chanticleer podcast, but I want to take another one, Anthony, because this one's good. This week, our written questions from Lucas from Melbourne. If you've got a question you want to send in, you can email us at chanticleer@afr.com. You can also send us a question in audio form. Just record a voice memo on your phone, include your name and where you're from, and email it to us. So this week, Lucas asks, I work at one of the big four banks where travel rules are strict and transparent. Long-haul flights get business class, but every dollar must show value because it's shareholders' money. So how is it that the private sector often holds itself to a higher standard than the public sector, which is spending taxpayer funds at a time of ballooning government debt and runaway expenditure? The Annika Wells episode shows that, quote unquote, it's within the rules has become a convenient shield even when behaviour clearly fails the pub test. There's that pub test again. Is it time the government tightened its travel and entitlement rules to match the standards expected in the corporate world? Thanks, Lucas. This is a tough one. I've got some sympathy for Wells in that she's got a really hard job that takes a lot of time, and those family entitlement rules are there for a reason because being a politician takes you away from your family.
Yeah.
But then to Lucas's point, if Lucas goes on a business trip overseas, interstate, he's not taking his family, is he?
True.
So this is a tough one. Do we need to tighten these entitlements, Anthony, and bring them more in line with what the corporate sector does? Or do we have to recognise that being a politician is a really tough, pretty thankless job, and there has to be some flexibility and dare I say, perks?
Yeah, James, I mean, covering sport, and nothing screams weekend work like being involved in sport. That's one of the reasons I got out of it as a whippersnapper. Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell to Lucas's question, I think if you went down on the street and asked 10 people, they'd all give you the same answer. Yes, some of this stuff looks like it's taking the mickey. So, yeah, I think it is time to bring it in line with the corporate world.
Yeah, I think there's probably a rewriting of the rules or a review of the rules to just find the right bit of flexibility is what we need. This is an area where you do need a bit of grey. We have real trouble attracting people into politics. We don't want to make it even tougher for them with the sacrifices they do make around family life. So there is a balance to be struck here. I think a review of these entitlements to try and get that balance right for the sort of, dare I say, modern age is what we need. So maybe someone from the corporate sector, the big four banks might be able to help with that.
True.
Okay, Anthony, another big week. One more week, nose to the grindstone. Let's get it done. Look forward to speaking to you next week for our big end-of-year special.
Absolutely. And everyone, hope you enjoy the CEO survey. We've put a lot of work into it. There's a lot of responses there, and I think there's some great material.
Well said. We'll see you all next week. If you like the podcast and you want to hear more, consider sharing or giving the podcast a review, as it helps other listeners find us. And don't forget to follow wherever you get your podcasts. At The Financial Review, we investigate the big stories about markets, business and power. For more, go to afr.com and you can subscribe to The Financial Review, the daily habit of successful people, at afr.com/subscribe. Chanticleer was hosted by me, James Thompson, and Anthony McDonald. It was produced by Mandy Coolin and Alex Gow. Our theme is by Alex Gow. Head of Premium Content is Fiona Buffini.
The Australian Financial Review.
A new true crime podcast you need to hear to believe.
I need police right now. I've just started smoking into my house.
2 men dead at the hands of a teenager, and almost every moment recorded.
Please, don't move.
Put the knife down.
I was just trying to help her.
What happened at Albert Beach was as horrific as it was baffling.
There's so much contradiction. We should know more than we know.
I'm Adam Hegarty. I'll take you inside one of the country's most confusing investigations in this exclusive 60 Minutes podcast.
Ambulance, police, inquest, a domino effect of failures. It's killing us.
I'm not a police officer anymore. I can speak more freely.
Albert Beach, Death at the Door, wherever you get your podcasts.